Today we're going to learn how to identify what data is tidy and what data is not tidy and why that might be useful. So this lecture will be broken into a series of several videos, maybe 6 or so, and you will use these to follow along with the tidyr.pdf file that's posted on your site as well. First off, let's start by looking at what is tidy data and what is not tidy data. First, let's library in tidyverse. And then we will look at some different tables that are built in to see what is tidy and what is not. In general, we're talking about tidy data is going to have one row for every observation and one column for each variable. So in this case, table 1 is in fact tidy because there's one observation for Afghanistan in the year 1999, and what is observed are the variables cases and population, as well as the year that it was made and the country it was made for. So for each country, there will be entries for each year. So this is a tidy data set. However, if we look at table 2, you can see this is not tidy, even though we still have multiple rows for each country, but you see that cases and population are on separate rows versus being part of the observations for that same year. Look at table 3. Here we have a rate, but rather than being a rate that's calculated from 2 different columns, it's combined as a character vector. Probably the most common form of non-tidy data is this kind that's in table 4A and also in table 4B, where you have the observations across various years. So really you had 2 different observations, but it's contained in one row rather than broken out in separate rows. Look at the visualization that's in your PDF file, and you can see how that might be broken out. So some of the frequent characteristics of non-tidy data is that you might have the column headings are values and not variable names. That was the case in table 4A and 4B. You could have variables stored in both rows and columns. You could have multiple variables stored in one column. That's the case with table 3 here with the rate. And you could have a single observational unit stored in multiple tables. One of the reasons that we want to have tidy data is because it's easier to analyze the data when it is in a tidy format. For instance, if we look here, we can see if we take table 1, which was tidy, we can compute the rate as a new column based off of that. We could also do something like counting the total number of cases per year by doing a count of year, weighting it by cases. We can also more easily graph our results using ggplot. And in this case, we can see that we can graph these results if they're already in a tidy format. Sometimes it's easy to determine the units and the variables or the observations and the variables, and sometimes it's more difficult. I want you to now start exercise 1, where you're going to look at the following data sets. And all we're trying to do at this point with these data sets is to identify why they might be tidy or not tidy. So this one was religion income. So you can see this is not tidy, and I want you to identify what it is not tidy about it in your first exercise, and also put down what you think the first 5 rows of a tidy version of this data set should be. Okay? And same thing for extra B. this data set, which is the billboard data set. Why is it not tidy? What would the first few entries be if it were tidy? And finally, the same for this data set. So that is the end of video 1. Get started on your first homework assignment, which would be to include those exercises, and come back